so enriching being able to chat together for Glow, our podcast on the Gospel Coalition Podcast Network. Again, we're 4 women from 4 different contexts with the same goal, which is that we want to magnify the Lord. We want to talk about what he's doing in our lives and ministries and around the world. And so today we're actually going to be talking about art. Art ultimately points us to the artist, capital A, our creator. I was first captivated by words when I was 9 years old. Every week, I attended a spoken word reading with my mom in a place called Soojin Park, which is in Los Angeles. And we would go to this place, it's called the World Stage. And it was filled with culture and jazz music and natural hair and African dance and African art. And there were writers and vinyl records to sift through. And there was 9-year-old me and I was taking it all in. And it would be late, like 10 o'clock at night. So it was pretty fun for a 9-year-old to be there. And it was significant because in that time of my life, oftentimes in my school curriculum, there wasn't much mentioned about the immense contributions of African Americans in our history curriculum. And so the World Stage was that place that I felt welcomed and I felt celebrated. And it began to influence a lot of my writing. So at a young age, most of my writing had to do with my ethnicity. That was kind of like all I talked about. And then I got to be about 17, and I concluded that while the fact that I was a Black girl, that was something to be celebrated, it wasn't all of who I was. I was emphasizing that which was physical and cultural, but I also wanted to communicate that which was spiritual. And so I started incorporating scripture in my poetry, in my spoken word, when I was about 17. I had never seen it done. But I thought, I want to communicate about, that which is important. And I actually became a Christian 5 years later. So I was a professing Christian at that time. And when I became a Christian 5 years later, I really wanted to use spoken word specifically to communicate the message which had transformed my life, which was the gospel of Jesus Christ. Francis Schaeffer, in his book, Art and the Bible, says Christian life itself should be our greatest work of art. And I just love that. We are a work of art made in the image of God. And the fact that we are made in the image of God means we have the capacity to create. And what we create, it testifies to the fact that we're image bearers. And so today we're going to be talking about all things creative, different art forms, different art form expressions. And so that may include painting or sculpting or dance, drama, film, all of the different art forms, which are the result of being made in the image of God and ultimately are made for the glory of God. And so I'm interested. I shared a little bit about spoken word, which is something that really lights me up and inspires me. It's an art form or a gift that the Lord has given me. I'm interested to know, what types of art inspires you, ladies?
So you talked about your 9-year-old being I can picture you there just surrounded by a whole lot of movement and music and color around you. And it brought me back to the circle we made when we were little in class. And the teacher had us all sat down in the circle in the center of the classroom, and we read Babar for the first time, Babar the elephant. And I love the story and I love the drawings, and it was so mind-boggling to me I must have been 6 when I saw this book for the first time, and I sort of fell in love with the idea of picture books, and I enjoyed them. My father got me so many books throughout the years, and I just spent afternoons watching, just looking at the details and the artistry that behind and the words. And so I think it has a very big impact to this day. And it took a while. I'm a graphic designer my major is graphic design. And it's very funny how God just combines everything that you're passionate about and uses it for his glory. So I never expected my professional career to have something to do with my walk with Christ. Sometimes when I was earlier in my walk with Christ, I assumed it had nothing to do with spiritual things, like this wasn't spiritual. And now, as I've matured more and walked more with God, how beautiful is it that everything you love and makes you passionate is actually from God. And so I am very moved by the common grace of good art, be it dance and music and picture books. Still, I get so inspired by that. And so, yeah, that would be me.
And since you started chatting about art, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, I realised that I hadn't really thought about it. So I don't know enough to feel like I don't know enough to be sitting at this table today.
Same here.
Me and you, Soojin. But when we were chatting yesterday, it's that wider scope of what art is made me realise that actually there's quite a lot that I do that would be classed as art. And so probably the thing that I love the most and have always done is drawing and painting. And so when I was a kid, it would be my happy place. Even now as an adult, it's one of the few places when I'm really stressed or when I just need my brain to be quiet. I find that painting or drawing something actually makes my brain stop. So for me, I've loved it. So I love looking at a really good painting and thinking I love that. But I also love looking at a really good painting and thinking, actually, I don't like that at all. Right. I can appreciate the effort, but I'm like, I know what I like. And I love, there's times where I can look at, like you were saying, Aixa, you look at something like a piece of creation and particularly sunsets, and I think, man, that's amazing. I mean, I can't even capture that with my eyes, never mind a photograph or a picture. So for me, art would definitely be it. And it sort of became a thing before I was saved. I would have trained in architecture. So I'm a bit of a building geek, but because I like the straight lines of drawing buildings, it's very satisfying. And the fact that someone paid me to draw is it's a bit like being a graphic designer. You get paid to draw is pretty amazing.
It feels like they pay you to play.
Yeah.
Like I told you a few episodes ago that my first picture book is coming out. And I still can't believe that is a thing. Like, wow, that's my job. And I have to almost pinch myself sometimes. It's part of what I do now. And I'm a grown-up and I draw and I still draw.
Yeah, I think for myself too, I don't think I know enough about art, but when I look back, I've always enjoyed being like a little creative. I think painting and doodling and drawing has always been kind of my peaceful place as well. The last couple of years, I really got into making cards for some reason, like birthday cards and Christmas cards, painting them. So I started doing that a little bit. I was really into origami for a while. I really like making things with my hands.
That's amazing art form. My friend does. It's so intricate. It's beautiful.
I always say I have small hands, so it's easier for me to do the little folds. And I actually, when I was thinking about this question and kind of broadening my understanding of what art is and what it means to be creative, I was thinking about how I actually used to do event planning before my job at my church, and so much of creating an event is designing an experience, which I think is very much an art form. You think about what people are going to see and experience, what they're going to hear and what they're going to, and so it's very much engaging your creative side with the planning side of it. And so I really love that. And for me, I think the thing that really moves me the most is movies. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, but I think every movie you can find a gospel arc, a gospel narrative in any movie. And I just love that some people are so gifted in capturing human emotion or the things that seem so common to us, and yet we brush by it, but they can capture it in film. I get so moved by that.
Yeah. That's someone who I think has wonderful at doing that. It's not a movie, but in theater is Shakespeare. So I've loved, I haven't read him recently, but just loved how he's able to capture human nature, and I find inspiration in so many ways. So yes, Shakespeare, but also the Great British Baking Show.
Love it.
Is what I love. Like just seeing people be able to bake these like breads, and twist it around and, create just so many wonderful treats. I think is so sweet. And then also hip hop dance is like where I take inspiration as well. And I'm not a dancer. I'm not a baker. But I just think it's amazing to be able to move your body in a particular way, and it inspires me. It inspires me to create other things like writing. But those are some ways that I'm encouraged and inspired. And I wonder, even as we come in contact with art all the time, but why should we value it? I mean, have you guys thought about that as a Christian? Why value art? Because we don't often value it these days.
Yeah, I think we take so much for granted. Like we are on this earth, and first of all, this day and age, we don't go out as much. We don't take the time to look outside the window intentionally. We don't sit in the grass enough. We don't, look at things long enough. And our God is the artist, as you said in the beginning. Why would he make 1,000 shades of pink for one sunset? Like, why? He takes pleasure in beauty just because. And, I don't know how many people get up to see that. Half of the time I'm asleep. I don't even get to see that. And he does it anyway. So it's just a part of the character of our God. A creator that just loves and loves through creating. And so it's an expression of love and pleasure, and just beauty is part of who God is. And so being able to connect in some way, shape, or form, even when people say, I don't know enough about art, or I'm not an artist. You, Soojin, you picked your color for your highlights and your hair and your lip gloss. And I mean, the art is everywhere. If we look real close, it's everywhere. The world wouldn't function without it, but we take it for granted.
And one thing I think that really gets to me about God as the creator is, whenever we create, we always have some kind of reference point, whether we're conscious of it or not. But it amazes me that God had no frame of reference. Like he made colors with absolutely no point of reference, just out of his own creativity. And that amazes me, right? Even the sunset, like he designed that out of his own imagination. And I think that is astounding. And our God, we always say God is creator, but that also means he is creative. He created. And I feel like part of imaging him is to create. And like you said, I feel like when we broaden our scope of what art is, we see it every day.
I was thinking more like you asked the question, how do we value art? And my brain instantly goes, well, people put monetary value on it. Like this painting's worth $25,000. I was thinking more from what we've been talking about in other podcasts, that actually the value is sometimes without even spoken word, it speaks to us. Like you making your cards. There's an image that can speak into that. And recently, in one of our last podcasts, you were talking about how people died during the pandemic, and they never got to say goodbye. And so this happened. My mum died during the pandemic, and my brother couldn't get to us. And my friend, for my birthday, so we have a Christian artist at home called Susanna, and she's exceptional. She works for us sometimes. And Miriam, my friend, commissioned Susanna to make this picture, this piece of art, a pencil drawing of my mum and my kids and me, and gave it to my birthday. And so she took all this like pictures from everywhere my daughter was in this in the background, and so the value to that is priceless. Not only because of all the people that were in the chain that made it, a bit like the shoes that we had in one of our last podcasts, but also because the thought of that they knew I would like it. I love art. I love paintings. She's amazing. So that value behind it was priceless. And it's an image that I've got that didn't exist because it's not like a photograph that it was taken from, but this nice memory that didn't really exist is what it is.
That's beautiful. And it's interesting how we can, as we look at a work of art, we find meaning. There's a connection there between this picture that you have now. And in one sense, it's like when you think about art, it kind of does imitate life or nature, things that are there that really resonate with us. And I was thinking about how typically in our quote unquote camp, we can be much more cerebral and much more analytical and intellectual. And I think sometimes we leave out the mystery. We leave out the beauty for beauty's sake. This idea that God creates beautiful things and it's not superficial. I think sometimes we associate beautiful things with things that are trivial. But even in the tabernacle, for example, he says it's ornate and all of these vibrant colors and pomegranates, that are purple and red and blue. And well, what's the purpose? It must be because God values beauty. The Levite priest and what they wore. And there's actually a scripture that talks about they were to wear these particular clothes for the sake of beauty. And I think we miss that sometimes, settling into, the imagination, taking those moments in, as you mentioned, like to pause and reflect and Selah, and I think we need art. Because we need to focus in on the imagination. We need to dream and not have everything figured out. Like there's a mystery here that I think is really important for us to capture. And one of the things that I wonder as Christians, specifically thinking about art, a question that I have is, does art need to be explicitly Christian?
So I think what I see is we move into human tradition a lot, and so we become afraid of that is unfamiliar, and art tends to go into the unfamiliar, although it uses familiar elements. So we feel very intimidated when something is not explicitly, gospel announcing. In traditional evangelicalism in Latin America, music is a very strong example, and I understand the argument behind, you have to be careful what you listen to and whatever. But then we go to the extreme, and then anybody that says I'm a Christian artist is lended an ear, and maybe the quality of the lyrics is nothing. Like it does not proclaim the gospel. It just, because it has a label on it, you accept it, and then you stop using your brain and your heart, and so that lacks the pure force of what art is supposed to be, which I think is not only moving the emotions but actually making you think. And we should be able to discern. That's the Holy Spirit is with us. And the Lord gave us the tools to actually discern and enjoy and digest what we are capturing with our senses. And so I believe, no, it doesn't have to be explicitly Christian in order to be enjoyed. And in fact, what you said about movies proclaiming, like you see the arc of God's story in everything. I do that all the time with music, with songs, good love stories always point to Jesus and sacrifice and all that good stuff. So I think we deprive ourselves of a lot of goodness when we limit our consumption.
And we talked about this too, about the concept of common grace and how we can't negate that. We can't negate the fact that, yes, unbelievers may not have special grace to give them salvation, but they still are image bearers of God. They still are creating, and it's all thanks to God. God is creating through them. And I think it would be such a waste to forego everything just because it's not explicitly Christian. Because at the end of the day, all good and beautiful things are a reflection of God.
That's good. There were two categories that I was told that was actually really helpful, I think, in this conversation, and that is art for the church and art from the church. So, when you look at, for example, Colossians 3, which says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, so that you're able at singing, songs and hymns and spiritual songs. Here's art specifically for the church that, it's going to explicitly be about Jesus. When you meet on a Sunday morning, I want the songs. Tell me about the gospel. Wash me with the truth, But then also you could be a Christian who's creating art outside of the church. It still has the world view of a Christian. So you've not lost sight of your Christianity, but it may not have the gospel in every lyric. Do you know what I mean? But as you think about the worldview, the overall worldview of that person, it is still coming through. That truth and beauty and goodness is shining. I don't know if those are helpful for you guys, but I know it was helpful when I heard that.
Totally. And also, let's not forget that your endeavors, your work is a mission field. And so we need artists. We need good art coming from the church for consumption in mainstream. And it's respectable. It's commendable. It's beautiful to see good art, good work being done.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about high quality work, like beautiful artwork, right? Just because it's explicitly Christian, if it's poor quality, that's not always a good thing, right? And I think we need to appreciate good quality art.
Any thoughts, Sharon?
No. I mean,
I love it.
I'm listening to you, making me think all these things that I'm mesmerized by the conversation that you're having. You have such a passion for art, but you tell it in such a big story. It makes me pause and think. Okay, my brain's thinking a saying that we would have in Scotland, which would be, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so I think that what I hear you saying is that actually there's a place for art. And when we think that we can only face that, whether it is in song or in what we read or in writing, when we only fit it into one tiny box, there's a potential for us to miss so much good stuff out there. But we do have to look at it with discernment.
Absolutely. And I think about the Lord. So I think about Psalm 19, which says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They use no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. And so, it's like, as you talked about the sunset, here's God displaying his glory through his art, through his creation. But he didn't choose to write John 3:16 in the sky. He could have. So we all could have seen it very clearly. He chose to, inspire men, to write that in a book. And so we see God using different forms of art in order to communicate his worldview in different ways. And, I think the same. With us. There are many different ways to communicate God's truth and who he is.
I have a little story here with a little bit of, I don't know if you would consider it high art, but it is art. It's music. When we adopted our 9-year-old then, I asked her a question in order to bring her home and have some sort of softer transition, I asked her what her favorite music was. And come to find out, the only music that they had access to was an old VHS tape of Michael Jackson. Thankfully, it was the king of pop. So she knew all the words to the repertoire that they had in that VHS. So I bought a playlist that's Michael Jackson's greatest hits, and I put it on the car on the way home when we drove home the first time. And some evangelical people near me raised their eyebrows like, why? That's not even Christian. And I'm like, you know what? That's common grace. I'm building a bridge for my daughter to come home to something that sounds like what she has known. And little by little, I had started introducing her to different music. And so music has been a bridge for me and her. And still, Michael Jackson sounds in my, I have a very mixed playlist. And I have to say that God used that bridge to bring her home in a more, comfortable, tender way. And so I guess Michael Jackson never even dreamed about being part of my family, but he is.
Okay. Or maybe he did.
You never know.
You don't
Never know.
That's right. Well, wonderful. This has been a great conversation on the art and what it means to think about art as a Christian. So it's been lovely, ladies.
So, girls, we've been thinking about art, and so back to our normal, shining a light on our differences. And what are some of the artistic expressions, and don't make me dance, Aixa,
It's too late. You already promised you would. Come on.
So what kind of, what artistic expressions have you participated in, or do you consider yourself, you're a graphic artist, but do you actually consider yourself artistic?
Yeah, I'd lie if I'd say anything else. I am a creative person. It's always very, very entertaining inside my brain, and it's hard for me to function in very structured people's way of seeing life. But
what's the most unexpected form of art that you've taken part in and thought, wow, I didn't expect that?
Oh, unexpected?
Yeah.
Maybe this.
What about yourself, Blair?
Yeah, I am creative for sure. Having, as I mentioned, been writing since I was 9. I love to sing. If I could take on or excel in one form of art, I wish I had learned an instrument. I started playing the piano in church when I was maybe 8 or 9, and I wish I kept up with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to call myself an artist, but I will answer the question of if I could be an artist in one way, what would it be? And it would probably be singing. Yeah. I mean, my friends know I love karaoke, but I don't sing. I just scream. I just scream the lyrics. But there's so many times where when I watch someone sing, especially leading worship, it just moves my heart. It's an instrument in itself. And if I had one artistic form I could excel at, I would probably choose singing.
That's great.
I also like singing, but I prefer to be congregational instead of up front. Yesterday we were having dinner, and Blair was trying to get us to sing.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And inside I'm going,
Sharon
please,
and I
Lord.
froze.
Yeah. Which is surprising because you love karaoke.
Oh, no, but not this kind of karaoke.
We have limits.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like all forms of, in my head, art is painting, it's sculpting. And I recently took a class, and one of the things that I realised is I like two-tone, monotone, plain and simple black and white art. I like to find the depth that, you were talking about how many pinks were in the sunset. So in one blue, how many blues can you find in that? And they taught us this. This method where you cover your whole painting in an oil paint and then you peel back, so you're scraping off the paint off the colour to reveal your picture. So it's like a negative, but you then layer on more paint to create these like other colours. So it's like one colour, again, doing 50,000 things. It melts my head. So yeah, it would be the one thing I've participated in.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Glow. Sorry, there's no singing or dancing. Maybe next season. But I just want to end with the reminder that you are the light of the world. A city that is set upon a hill shall not be hidden. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a basket, but on a light stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Thanks for joining us, and please join us next week for our 9th episode.